Well, there has certainly been an increase in military activity around here in the last hour or so. We've seen a couple of helicopters flying constantly low over the building, which seems to be putting a lot of pressure on the gunmen, on the attackers that are still holed up inside the mall. We also heard a fairly large explosion about an hour or so ago, and there's been a lot of movement of military. We've also heard some gunfire. Now, there's been reports that the security services, the Kenyan security services, have blown open a hole in the side of the mall complex to try to gain access to it. There has been a lot of speculation about what this might mean. I've just been speaking to the government spokesman, who has told me that this, as far as they're concerned, this is not the final assault. What that means, oops, it looks as though we've lost our light. I'm not sure if you can see us at all, but I'm just going to keep talking for the moment.
Yeah, we can see you, Peter. Keep going.
What seems to have happened... Okay, you can see us. Okay, well, that's good. Really, there's been a lot of speculation. Everyone wants this to end. There's been a lot of political pressure on the authorities to try and end this. There's been a lot of pressure from the relatives of the victims. But it looks as though the security services and the government are prepared to play the long game here if need be, simply because there is an advantage in waiting this out. It's very difficult to know what's going on inside. As I mentioned a moment ago, we do know that there's more military activity. We can't tell you exactly what that might mean.
And Peter, we're hearing that President Obama has just been speaking to President Kenyatta, offering his support. Do we know what was said?
Look, I don't have a great deal about the contents of that conversation, but one thing I do know is that Uhuru Kenyatta has been incredibly concerned about the travel advisories that a lot of governments typically put out after these kinds of incidents, warning tourists from coming to Kenya, advising them to stay away. And that causes all sorts of problems because tourism is one of the biggest foreign currency earners in this country. It's one of the most important industries. It employs hundreds of thousands of people right across the country. It brings in enormous amounts of foreign currency. And the last thing Kenya needs at this point is to see those tourists disappear. Now, obviously, a lot of people will be very concerned about coming here anyway, but if the government issues a travel advisory, what it means is that insurance companies won't insure travellers to a place like Kenya, and that means that instinctively tourists will shy away. And I know that would have been one of the topics of conversation. Certainly, Uhuru Kenyatta mentioned that in his news conference. He appealed on foreign countries against issuing those travel advisories to try and avoid the kind of damage that would cause to the Kenyan economy.
And presumably there will also be questions asked about how, if this group is al-Shabab or linked to al-Shabab, how they were able to launch such a devastating attack on the heart of Kenya's capital.
That's right, and a lot of the attention is now focusing on the Somali community within Kenya. Remember that Kenya has a very long and porous border with Somalia. There are also Somalis living on both sides of the border. There are many Somalis here who've lived here for many generations, but there is also a very large population of refugees who've come over over the past few years and to take shelter in Kenya. And there are a lot of people here who have both connections or sympathies with al-Shabab. Now, we don't know exactly what the identity of the attackers is. They could be Somalis or they could be Kenyans. We still don't know that. But the problem for the authorities is establishing connections, establishing the kinds of intelligence networks that they need to be able to penetrate and monitor what's going on within the Somali community. Earlier this evening, I was speaking to an official from the community in a district called Eastleigh, which is known as Little Mogadishu here. And he was telling me that they are planning to hold a blood drive, set up some tents to try and collect blood from the Somali community to express solidarity with the victims of this attack. The Somali community held a news conference earlier today in which they unreservedly condemned the attack. They said this was an attack on all Kenyans, on all people, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of their religion. And I know that the community itself is deeply concerned about the potential for a backlash. It's almost inevitable. It's almost inevitable that we're going to see xenophobic responses from people here. Certainly it's happened after we've seen grenade attacks and so on that have been linked with the Somali community in the past. And I think after this it's going to be very, very difficult for them. They're aware of it and they're appealing now for calm, for solidarity and support for the Kenyans.